What's up, everyone? Well, things don't always go according to plan, and so today I'm going to see what I can do with this almost dead, but not quite, Monterey Cypress. I've actually shown this tree in a Bonsai Society of San Francisco show before. I started it from a seed, and it is about 15 years old or so. Monterey Cypress are great because they grow really quickly, but a lot of people don't realize that they have some downsides as well. And one of those is that they're susceptible to a pitch canker, which is a fungal infection that gets into the cambium and can kill off full-size trees. And I suspect that that's sort of what happened here. It's kind of interesting so this started declining in health a couple of years ago, and so I decided to just sort of leave it alone, let it run and see what would happen. And meanwhile, I was treating it with fungicides. I thought maybe it had root rot and that was causing the problem. And I still don't know for sure because I haven't sent anything off to a lab to be tested. But what ended up happening after treating it with multiple fungicides is that the entire tree minus this one branch died. And so today I'm going to see what I can do in terms of moving this back on its way to being a bonsai. And one of the things that's kind of interesting is that I still have a usable tree here, and in some ways it's more like a Monterey Cypress in the wild in the sense that it now has all of this deadwood. But I want to reorient a lot of this foliage to bring it more into being kind of a cypress shape. And this is very cypressy. I've cut off all these dead branches that were up here, and I'm going to go ahead and use a Dremel to strip off the rest of this bark that's not easily coming off, and then also remove wire and rewire it to reorient things. All right, the Dremel tool's not really getting the job done the way that I want to, so I'm going to go ahead and switch to using some splitting and carving. But before I do that, I just want to point out that there's a couple places on here where it's obvious that there was some insect eating the cambium layer. There are small beetles and whatnot that do this, and it's basically all of these insects. They lay their eggs, and then the larvae are chewing on the cambium layer of the tree. So what this means to me is, and the secondary effect is that a lot of these insects are vectors for fungal pathogens, which they're basically injecting directly into the live tissue of the tree. So anyway, I'm gonna kind of check this out, and it makes me think maybe that I need to treat my other cypresses as well as this one with some insecticide to ensure that if there are any borers in there, that I can knock them out. So one of the things I can't really tell is, did this happen, what happened first? Did this die and then the beetle got in there, or did the beetle get in there and then it died? I'm guessing that the beetle is actually the cause of the death of these guys now that I'm seeing this damage. So I've got some here, and then I've got some over here on the other trunk, and I've got some down here in this area, so you can see that there's a hole, and then this is like tunneling, and another small hole there. So I'm going to go up here and remove some of this bark and see if I find more, and if I do, I'm guessing that's actually what caused the death of the majority of this tree, which is kind of crazy because I've actually never, up to this point at least, been aware of borers causing this much damage to a tree here in San Francisco. So this looks like it could be canker, and it's hard to say for sure, but that oozing sap. In any case, I'm going to clean up this wood using a wire wheel here in a minute, but I just wanted to kind of get in here and look at, you know, the remnants of what happened, because I wasn't expecting to find borer damage in here. I guess I should have thought of it, but I was, it's one of those things where you're trying to diagnose things, and absent any feedback, it can be actually really difficult. One of the interesting things that you can see here is that the side of the lifeline has a really weird look to it, and I did just remove this bark. I just peeled it off a couple days ago, so maybe this, now that it's getting a little bit more air and light, will even out, but I'm concerned that, you know, obviously this is callus tissue, and I don't know what that lifeline over time is going to look like, but obviously it should start to create bark, and then that should start to make this trunk a lot less round, because it now only has one tiny little lifeline on one side. No more borers, fingers crossed. So as you can see, the properties of the wood, which is dry in this case, are significantly different than when it's wet. I'm not sure that one is actually better than the other, but from the standpoint of trying to split wood and create natural looking deadwood on a composition, this is very, very different than the juniper fiber pulling process that I did in a recent video, and that you can learn about from the CDAO books. So as you can see, when I'm splitting this, I'm finding tunnels into the wood like this one right here, and that is a sure sign that it's a borer and not just like a bark beetle or something. So these tunnels that are in here, I think, you know, at this point the insect is dead, but it's a good lesson for thinking about how to approach if you have branch dieback on a Monterey Cypress. It's not just potentially a fungal issue, it could be a borer issue. And the funny thing is, you know, Monterey Cypress are not that common as bonsai, and when I've taught programs about them before, I've had people ask me, well, what do you do? Because every time I try to grow a Monterey Cypress, I have a branch die, and then another branch die, and then the whole tree dies. Well, it's like, is that the canker, or is it the, you know, these insects attacking the tree, or both? And so my previous recommendations were basically to treat with a systemic fungicide like propiconazole or something like that. But I think added to that, it's going to be important to find a regimen that will deal with any boring insects as opposed to exciting insects. So looking in here, I can see some insect frass on the edge of this, where it looks like the beetle was in there kind of eating away at the cambium, and then the tree kind of died back around it and started making wood beside it. So all interesting features for deadwood. It's the kind of thing that you frequently see in trees coming out of the wild, but unfortunately in this case I'm not sure, well, I'm not sure until I finish restyling this that it'll end up being a better tree than it was before. another hole in the wood right there, a couple of them actually. I'm gonna split some more of this off just to reduce this in advance of working with the remaining foliage. All right, so I'm using this Dremel or Fordham with a wire wheel on it, and what I'm going to do is just kind of come in and strip off remaining bits of bark here like that, and basically smooth out the wood. And in spots where I've split it, let's see what happens. So it kind of cleans up the wood. It doesn't just smooth it out, it actually removes some of the softer wood from between the harder wood. But it's going to allow me to accentuate some of these contours in the wood. Now, I'm not 100% sure I'm done with wood carving here, but I think once I clean this up, I can then apply lime sulfur to it, which I'm not sure I'm going to do today, but that will give me a better idea of what this is going to look like, and therefore allow me to decide where I'm going to place the foliage from the remaining part of the tree. I've wire wheeled pretty much this whole thing, and I didn't get everything off, but I think that's all I'm going to do for now. It looks a lot better, and I'm going to let the upper parts here that I broke recently age a little bit more before I do too much to them. So I also just kind of vacuumed up all of the mess, and now I am on to taking off the wire. All right, basically we have to start over with the design of this tree, and to do that I've added a couple of wires here to some of the main branches that I want to keep. And so in designing it as a new tree, essentially I have to think, okay, what are the most interesting aspects of this tree, or what most interesting features? And I think that this junction of the live and dead wood is really attractive, and I like the way that using the wire wheel has created sort of that contrast that's very common in junipers. We don't see it too much in cypresses, but that's probably because we don't see a lot of cypress bonsai. So I think of this kind of as like two potential fronts, because we want to be able to see this relationship here. It has the potential to really change in terms of the aesthetics over time, and I imagine that it will continue to get better, because it's sort of going to create a wider and wider trunk, because all the wood that's coming from here is going to get laid down. But I'm not 100% sure what it's going to look like, so I'll have to grow it out for a while. So this is essentially gone from, you know, something that was a refined tree and well on its way. I had actually shown it before, and now it's back in middle development. So it's important to recognize that and to reset and go back into techniques that are needed for middle development. So I didn't actually have to strip all the bark off of this today, but the reason I did that was I really wanted to be able to see the relationship between these two parts of the tree and use that as the impetus for the design of the tree. Now, I might come back and do additional carving here. I certainly haven't finished removing tool marks, but what I did do was get far enough so that I can see kind of the rough relationship. And this ultimately could be reduced significantly. I can still come back and do that, but what I did was reduce it enough so that I can take this, bend it up, give it some very cypressy kind of movement, and then use that to create what I think will be ultimately the trunk line of the tree. Now, the tree has a ways to go, and the reason I've only put two actual larger wires on here rather than wiring out all of this foliage is that I really am not happy with the taper from here to here. I really want to see this section of the now trunk being significantly bigger, at least half the size of this. So I'm gonna use this mostly as a sacrifice branch, I think. I might change my mind later, but at the moment, this seems like it'll just be a sacrifice branch. So all of that ultimately would just be reduced to a couple of gin. Now I might end up using this as part of the composition, or that might be removed as well. In the meantime, I'm gonna keep this cut back so that I don't create any more space here because these guys don't really backbud. So the structure that I've set here is really intended to just be the foundation, and I don't really need to do anything else to it right now other than get this thing growing vigorously. I'm going to keep an eye on the wire because as cypresses grow, they have a tendency to create wood pretty quickly, and that means that it could scar pretty badly if I don't get the wire off at the appropriate time. If you have experience working with trees that have to be completely redesigned because of dieback, share it in the comments below. This is going to be an ongoing challenge, so I will share the next steps when I'm ready, and it might be a year or two, it might be less, depends on how well the tree grows. Thank you everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed that, and we'll see you next time.